I hope you're all doing okay. I'm hanging in there barely. There's a jet stream you see passing over Japan. That's Japan, kind of up middle of the picture. And there's always a jet stream passing over Japan, which always makes you wonder how much radiation it's carrying from Fukushima. That may be a reason why they want to keep the jet stream out of California, but then it ends up in Canada. The Philippines, just east of the Philippines, we see a system developing a spin before it has a huge amount of water. That's backwards. That's the cart before the horse. Generally, it takes a hot column of water to create the spin. So a spin without a lot of water is really suspicious of artificiality. Speaking of artificiality, hello down there in Australia. Off to your west, you have looks like an artificial low pressure system. It started a few days ago, smaller, kind of grew, has a really well-defined eye. That mostly dry, but it sure is driving your jet stream south of you. And you can see this is the same system that is driving their jet stream in the wrong direction. They call that El Nino, but I don't know whether it's really a El Nino anymore when it's created by a vortex and not a shift in the trade winds. The Pacific, you can see the equatorial belt of water appears to be forming. It's trying to, but when you go down to low-level clouds, most of that's devoid of water. But you do see some S-shaped vertical flow, more and more vertical flows happening on planet Earth. We zoom in, and you're going to be surprised what this looks like. This vertical flow, we'll call it the Pacific vertical flow. It isn't so vertical a day before, so just remember the Pacific vertical flow. That's the name. Upper left, you see a huge vortex moving in. That's going to be driving, picking up water from the equatorial belt as well. And the lower right, look at that, like a suction. You see like a three-pronged suction, really powerful, low pressure. That I call that the southwest spiral. The southwest spiral didn't even exist a few days ago, but it's so strong now. It is pulling water from the equatorial belt almost at Hawaii, almost. 3/4 of the way to Hawaii. What could be so strong? Well, here it is. Look at that spiral. That's the southwest spiral. It did not look like a spiral yesterday, but we did see incredible rotation. It was more elongated and diving down through Nevada and into Arizona. And now it's making a loop and going to be headed back up towards the northeast. But look at those three arms. There's those three arms. So there you go. It's proof that water, that spiral over the United States, is pulling this water up from the equator. There's those three arms again. Amazing. That's just amazing. That's such a draw. And to think it's happening, and wherever that spiral is, there's high winds. And wherever that jet stream is, there's high winds. This is mid to upper level. When we go to lower level, most of that will not have water in it. To the immediate right, that water that's leaking in, that's the remnants of Hurricane Iota. We look at Alaska, we see high pressure water spinning in the wrong direction. That's what happened to the Central Pacific flow, and was making that opposite spin, but then it just disappeared. Now we're looking at the United States basically, and you can see that high pressure swinging down. And this is yesterday, and you can see the southwest looks like a long, elongated cavity there. But not today. Today it is drawing water like you wouldn't believe. And yes, that little bit of that water coming up from the bottom is from Iota. It's funny how Iota has Yoda in it. Anyways, so we go over to the Atlantic Ocean, and you see that wall of vertical water. It's being created just west of Cuba. I call that the Cuban fire hose. So you keep an eye on that. You'll be shocked with how that started. But that's headed north and really fast too. Really extremely fast. And there's a low pressure up there that's elongated that's drawing that up. In the upper right, there's a spiral, but we'll look at that later. Here's that elongated spiral that's pulling and tugging and drawing on the Cuban fire hose. This is pointed right at Greenland, that dark area. That used to be round 2 days ago, completely spherical, coming out of southern Canada. We go down to the Caribbean and you see the bottom portion of the fire hose, the Cuban fire hose. Doesn't it look like a fire hose of water just pushing out? But we see a high pressure ridge kind of clearing out the Gulf of Mexico and kind of pushing the Cuban fire hose out a little bit towards more the Atlantic. At the south, right at where Panama is, you see a sudden explosion of moisture. And we've had some huge thunderstorms yesterday and today just pop up there in an explosion of water. We're looking for an invisible spiral that we know is in the Caribbean. We don't see it today because a lot of the water has been pulled either over to the mainland of Central America or pulled up into that Cuban fire hose. So we pull back once again just to get a look at the Cuban fire hose. Is headed north. We see a spiral at the upper at the top, another low pressure spiral. These are so strong, that water is racing north. Literally in 4 hours you cover half the United States with that water. In 8 hours it goes all the way from Cuba to Canada. It's amazing speed. And you can see the Cuban fire hose off to the right, and that elongated low pressure, it soon to wrap on itself. It'll wrap over on itself. But you can see the southwest spiral right here. There it is. That did not look like this. We just showed you what it looked like a day ago. We'll show it to you again. But we have a couple a twin low pressure system started up and is creating an amazing draw and driving and going to be pulling up some of that water from Iota. This is northern Mexico, right below Texas. Look at those waves. They're moving. They're just bizarre, and there's no water there. There's no clouds there, but they are those waves. And when you see a pattern like that, you have to think of waves. Also today, people were saying they were chemtrailing like mad on the southeast coast. So I went to look at the weather map to look at the edge of that jet stream that's being pulled way north. It's actually pulling on the Cuban fire hose, and it's drawing this water up northeast. Now, look at these cloud formation. This is the mid-Pacific stream that I showed you, but it's a clockwise rotating system that had an extremely fast clockwise spin, similar to the one I just showed you in Alaska. And we're going to pull out and take a better look at that. So that's a very high rate of spin. That water is moving incredibly fast. It's just 4 hours. It's just moving halfway across from Siberia to Alaska. We look at it pull out, and we can see that vortex has deformed, but he still had a strong draw upon some of the equatorial moisture by Hawaii. That's that arm that extends off the bottom of your screen, and you just see behind it a start of a clockwise rotation, and that clockwise rotation became very extensive. You see that blue making a hook in the Pacific Ocean. That is an amazing, very fast rotating clockwise anticyclone that is split. You've got a spin clockwise, counterclockwise above it. Below it you have a clockwise counter rotation, and giving rise to an actual hook. You can see on the very left-hand side of your screen that water is curling around clockwise and very rapidly, giving rise to some bizarre cloud formations. Now, some of my images, I don't know what happened to them. Sometimes I go a little out of order because I screen capture solar stuff in between the weather stuff, and then they kind of get buried. But you can see at that hook, that clockwise hook, we zoomed in on a special IR and got, that's a counterclockwise circle you see in the middle of Pacific, and that was replaced by the Pacific vertical stream. But there's no vertical stream there now. So 2 days prior to the vertical stream, we had this. We had a massive clockwise hook, and we had it at this southern portion that you're looking at now, the Pacific. We have Hurricane Iota water joining a southern stream that is mostly dry and will become wet once that moisture gets drawn up into that system. That three-prong system we showed you, created by the southwest spiral, which isn't quite yet a southwest spiral. Flipping back over to the Atlantic, you can see the Cuban fire hose became quite extensive. We'll go back another day, it's not this extensive, but you can see that water, some of it's being split, pulled across the Atlantic up into the same spiral system. First you have water going north and then being transferred over to Europe by this rotation. This is a rotation that's pulling water north. It's pulling part of the Cuban fire hose right up to Greenland. And you'll see some clockwise rotations, and some of them are very dry, which kind of defies the laws of weather. But it in itself is creating a counter rotation. When you spin something really fast, I think of it as stuff flying off of a merry-go-round. I try not to say kids flying off a merry-go-round, but that's a very strong system that's pulling and drawing water north. And so then we go back just another day sooner. We look at that South Pacific, and we see that water just hanging there from Iota, waiting to be drawn up into that system. But you can see that system above Iota is moving pretty fast. You see little tiny puffs that are streaking along there, headed towards the southwest spiral. But then, where's the spiral? Oh, at the very bottom you see the single spiral that soon became a double spiral that we showed you early in the video. But look at that wall of water pushing down from the north. Down, looks like you're going to drench California, doesn't it? Well, we all know what happens. And then, of course, off to the right, you do see tremendous speed on some of those vertical moistures that just, for a vertical stream, they're just ripping along. So we got water pushing down on the left and water pulling up on the right, all driven by spirals. Now, before that wall of water had an opposite clockwise flow to it, we had counterclockwise flow, and you can see the spiral just extremely distorted. That thing was a nice spherical storm 2 days ago and developed a flat edge on the back and the front, and this thing is going to get squeezed north and taking water completely out of the United States and up into Canada. But remember, those streams that are coming through pass right over Japan. So we don't know how much radioactive cesium and iodine is in that stream passing over Japan. But driving that jet stream that's pulling water up, you can see the counterclockwise rotation that's very small but very compact. You can see the eye. It will create a bigger spiral folding back on itself. We call that artificial because it just popped up over land. Speaking of popping up, look at that thunderstorm over Central America, Panama, and parts of northern part of South America. No wonder people getting caught off guard by flash floods. I mean, that's an amazing just explosion of water. Uh, Now we're looking at Nicaragua and Honduras and El Salvador, and they're still getting rained on. There's still thunderstorms in the area. They can't take any more water. It's raining every day. Usually when a hurricane passes through, you have several days of just dry heat. Not there. You got more thunderstorms. More thunderstorms. Yep. Here you can see that Cuban fire hose up center, and you can see the water being pulled into the same system as the northern belt. So you have one system controlling both jet streams. One, the south jet stream, and the other coming from the equator, and the other, the north jet stream, passing underneath Greenland. Now where that water splits and goes off across the Atlantic is right here. That's that Cuban fire hose being split. You can see some of it going north and some of it being split. But notice that wall of water pushing down on the left. And notice at the bottom of this screen you see a dark circle. That's the start of that double spiral, southwest spiral. It's just now starting. How does such a strong low pressure system jump up overnight and control an entire stream of moisture that stretches out into the Pacific? How does that happen? That's just amazing. It's almost defying the laws of physics by the speed at which it happens, especially because hot water is usually what creates low pressure areas, and most of these are dry when we put them on low level IR. But we keep it at mid-level IR so you can see the systems better and the rotations better. So I went over there to the Spain, Morocco border, and there's that system. You can see the very bottom of water coming up and going into Africa. That's that moisture that's being split out of the Caribbean and coming up from the Atlantic equatorial belt. You can see it right here very perfectly. And then you have another stream that's coming in south of Greenland, being pulled across the Atlantic. So you have two streams being controlled by one spiral. And again, here's that spiral up by Greenland. It butts up against the other spiral and it flattens out and elongates. We go down to Cuba, get a better look at that split region. We see it almost looks like chemtrailing going on. It just depends if we see crossing or not. But again, water just popping up, exploding over the Atlantic as if it were summer. But it's not. So we go to that split and yeah, we do see crossing. So for some reason they're splitting that jet stream and sending some of the water across the Atlantic into Africa. And that Cuban fire hose started as a little puff. We thought it was dissipating water, and then we found out a day later it was actually expanding water. Now, some people in the plain states were saying they were seeing chemtrailing. We zoomed in on the satellite to see if we could see any suspicious lines in the sky, some X's and crosses and Y's. And well, you can see what's there. So really, this system coming down from the north, that's that clockwise push, high pressure. That stream that's headed to the right, that's a lower jet stream, South Pacific. Right below that is the moisture from Iota, and it's amazing what 3 days makes. that low pressure, the high pressure spinning coming down, uh, replaced a void and avoided water from going into California at whatsoever. It just completely bypassed the state. That low pressure dropping down is actually a clockwise rotation, but in some of the far away imaging, they limit your exposures now to just 2 hours of frames or streams. But I mean, and then before that, it was this. I mean, what a difference! That clockwise moisture's coming in from the left. That straight ahead is a beautiful, nice spherical system, but you can see it splitting and peeling off and going down the western seaboard. And just the start of the southwest spirals. And you think that that Cuban fire hose was always a big, huge patch of water that can be streamed north and then east. Well, that's a small patch that we first notice. But you can see that clockwise spin coming down. They call that an anticyclone. You can see near the bottom of the screen the formation, the start of the southwest spiral, but there's nothing there 3 days ago, 3.5, 4 days ago. So where did those southwest spirals just happen to pop up out of nowhere, seemingly? And that clockwise spin replaced what you just saw, and then all of a sudden after that, the next day, that clockwise spin was gone because that southern moisture belt just became so intense, sheared off all of that, and a second system rolled through, again drawing water more northward again. So that's quite a lot of change every 24 hours. And to end up back with more vertical streams in the Pacific, moisture belt reforming along the equator. But you see that dark band streaking across there, and you saw the southwest spirals. Those are very strong now, and they'll be pulling iota water up through Mexico, possibly into Texas. But time will tell. It's hard to say what's going to happen. But those southwest spirals weren't there 2 days ago, and we had just a general flow from the previous spirals that have come through. But once those southwest spirals popped up, that southern moisture jet just incredibly took off, and it maybe you could see there was no southwest spirals just a couple days ago. So that's how that works.